Oh, the time has arrived, my friends. Week one of the fantasy football season is almost upon us. No more countless hours painstakingly researching draft strategies, who to pick, where the sleepers are. None of that. No, we're here. It's must starts. It's must sits. I got you covered. We're going to go running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. I'll wrap it up with quarterbacks because you guys care less about that. And I'm never going to tell you to start your first round players. Mostly the same with like second and thirds. We got some mixed in along the way. Start your studs no matter what. Good matchups, bad matchups. You draft them in the early rounds because you play them in bad matchups because they're good. I'm Dave Lochran from Stochastic Fantasy Football. Hit that thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment. I try and hit on all of them, no doubt, as many as I can, answer your questions, whatever you got, and stick around later. I'm going to tell you how to get a lot of free money heading into the NFL season on DraftKings and FanDuel. Always take advantage of free money. Let's make it happen. Must start running backs, kicking it off with your boy Joe Mixon. Like I said, not a lot of these guys in the list, but we'll start off slow and then we'll get into the nitty gritty. Joe Mixon at home against the Pittsburgh Steelers, 6.5-point favorites, 25.5-point implied total. The Steelers last year allowed the most rushing yards per game. Even worse, this team allowed 5 yards per attempt. That's absurdly bad. They won't be as bad this year, I don't think. But given the projected game flow in this one, given that Cincinnati is almost a 7, they're touchdown favorites, Mixon should see north of 20 touches in this game. In 2 games versus Pittsburgh last year, Mixon totaled 255 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Beautiful line there. I think we see more of that on Sunday. Next up, A.J. Dillon on the road against the Minnesota Vikings. If you drafted Dillon in the 5th or 6th round, you did it with the intentions of starting the guy. He got the large majority of goal line carries over the second half of last season, right? He's primed to get a ton of work this year as well, especially losing Davante Adams. We'll get into all of that. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, a lot of targets to go around as well. And it won't just be Aaron Jones. Dillon's a far better pass catcher than he's given credit for. And while the Vikings should be, around average in terms of limiting running backs this season, they allowed the 10th most fantasy points to the position last year with 12 rushing touchdowns and 5 receiving touchdowns surrendered. Expect Matt LaFleur not just to lean heavily on A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones on the ground this year, but also get them very involved in the passing game. More Jones than Dillon, but still enough to make him an every week starter, especially in week one. Javonte Williams at the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks allowed a preposterous 1,106 receiving yards to running backs last year. Don't even know how that happened. They also allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to the position. They were fine at stopping the run, but it really shouldn't matter much in week one. The Broncos are touchdown favorites with Russell Wilson making his debut against his former team, and they have a solid 24-point implied total on top of that. Melvin Gordon's going to get some work. We all know that. We've heard about it all damn summer. But Williams should play way more on passing downs, which is huge for this matchup, and he should get more than enough opportunities, and definitely more than Melvin Gordon on the ground to have an excellent week as touchdown favorites against the Seattle Seahawks. Antonio Gibson at home against the Jags. Who would have thought we'd be talking about Antonio Gibson? This guy's back to being the number one after some unfortunate circumstances came, struck down on Brian Robinson. And you've got Gibson as a 3-point home favorite against the Jaguars in week one. I didn't think I'd be including him in a must-start video for week one, but here we are. And if you need a viable running back 2, an RB2, or a flex option for this week, he makes for a really good one. 2021, this is funny to me, right? Like just the skewed memory when it comes to certain players. 2021 is viewed by many as a down and disappointing season for Antonio Gibson, mostly because he had a lot of weeks where he would just disappear. But he still cracked 1,300 yards from scrimmage and had 10 total touchdowns. He was the RB10 on the season. He was also 4th in the league with 258 carries. So he faded out a lot, and it looked like he was about to fade out this summer behind Brian Robinson, but he's once again locked in as Washington's number 1 in week 1 against the Jags as a favorite at home. I like it. Must sit running backs. I got a couple for you. I'm not going to go crazy on these. And listen, if you drafted these guys and you have no other options, who am I to tell you not to play them? Sometimes, you have to make the best of a bad situation. But first up, J.K. Dobbins. It's tough because he's coming back from an ACL. And you've got, I don't know why I had my thumb up like that. I was about to go 2, but I forgot what the second point was. You have John Harbaugh saying it looks like he mostly got his quickness back, but We don't know how involved he's going to be. They just brought Kenyon Drake on. I know Gus Edwards is out as well, but you've got a rushing quarterback in Lamar Jackson. It is a good matchup, but if you have better options than Dobbins, given all the uncertainty in this week, I would definitely take it. Also, Breece Hall. I love this kid's upside. I think at some point in this season, he's definitely going to be the guy. But in week one, against this Ravens defense that is probably going to smother the run game anyway, and Michael Carter still appears primed, at least to start the season as their number one, Breece Hall, if I have a better option, would be a guy I'm looking away from. Must-start receivers. A.J. Brown against the Detroit Lions. Not a ton needs to be said with this one. Brown gets a phenomenal matchup against the Lions, whose secondary is going to be, let's say, shaky at best and disastrous at worst. The only reason the Lions didn't give up more fantasy points to wide receivers last year was because their run defense was even worse. But they still ranked 31st in pass coverage, according to PFF. They allowed a league worst 7.6 yards per attempt and the third most passing touchdowns with 31. Brown can get it done anywhere on the field, and he's a monster after the catch. We all know that. So yeah, Jeff Okudah coming back isn't going to help the Lions on Sunday. Lock in A.J. Brown. You drafted him in the third round for a very good reason, for matchups like this. And for those of you bettors out there, I'm laying the 3.5 points. It's in some spots, but you can get 3.5 points on the Philadelphia Eagles this week. I know people are stoked about the Detroit Lions with Hard Knocks, and I love Dan Campbell too. I get it. But I just think there's too much going for this Philadelphia team on both sides of the ball not to hit them. And if you want to do it and get $350 for free when you do so, go on either FanDuel, where you can get it at 3.5, or on DraftKings. Just use the link down below. Sign up and deposit $5. Even if you guys aren't sports bettors, you're getting $150 when you bet a game, okay, on FanDuel, just for depositing $5 and putting that $5 on it. That's it. I mean, do it right now and let it sit until next week, because as soon as that game kicks off, whether you win or lose, you got it. And on DraftKings, if you guys are new users, $5 deposit using that link in the pinned comment or the description, $200 over there. So if you haven't signed up on either of them yet, that's $10 turned into I don't know how to do that with my hands. Turned into $350 just by betting a game that you're going to watch and enjoy anyway and putting $5 single on each. So sports better or not, I mean, you should be, and you should check out our Odd Shopper channel. It's all right there. All of these promos don't last a long time because these books want to get it in before the season starts. Take advantage of it. Links in the pinned comment or in the description. FanDuel and DraftKings, whichever one you prefer. $5 on any of those games when you sign up and deposit. Michael Pittman at the Houston Texans. I actually think the Texans secondary and defense could take a big step forward this season. So for all of you Texans fans, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And things are looking up for sure. You know, they drafted Derek Stingley, 3rd overall. That guy's going to be a stud. But Pittman is going to be a beast himself. And he has a quality veteran quarterback in Matt Ryan throwing him the football. Also, Pittman has virtually zero competition for targets. He could legitimately have a 30% target share this year, and it wouldn't be shocking. He and Matt Ryan showed a clear chemistry in the preseason too, and it should carry straight into week one. The Colts have the 4th highest implied total on the slate, almost 27 points, and they're 8-point favorites on the road. So while the future is bright for Houston, at least it appears to be that way, there's zero chance you're not locking Pittman in this matchup. No doubt about it. Juju Smith-Schuster at the Arizona Cardinals. Smith-Schuster appears primed to be the wide receiver 1 in Kansas City right now, and he's going to get a great opportunity to prove it right out of the gate in week 1. The Chiefs have the highest implied total of any team going this week, and this road tilt with the Cardinals has the highest game total as well, 53.5 points. With Tyreek Hill and to a lesser extent guys like Byron Pringle and Demarcus Robinson vacating 260 total targets from this offense after last year, some of these Chiefs receivers could absolutely eat this year and on Sunday. And it begins, or if it begins with Smith-Schuster, you're going to want him plugged in for week 1. This Cardinals secondary is not going to be good. I'm telling you, it's just very unlikely. They paid no attention to it in the offseason. And last year, they gave up 4 more touchdowns to receivers than the next worst team. That's how many touchdowns they allowed. Also, if you're in a deep league, 14-team league, right, or just a lot of starting spots, Marquez Valdes-Scantling just signed a 3-year, $33 million deal. Could be a deep threat, not, of course, to replace Tyreek Hill, but to get a lot of those deep targets that they're going to be needing. I don't hate him if you're in deeper leagues at all. I think he's a nice little sleeper in week 1, out of concussion protocol as well. Next up, you got my boy Courtland Sutton at the Seattle Seahawks. Yes, if you hadn't known yet, we're picking on the Seattle Seahawks this week. Sutton's playing with a competent quarterback for the first time in his career. It's that simple. And his first game is going to come against a Seattle secondary that should get picked apart by Russell Wilson. Everyone has their own opinions here, and I get that. It's fine. That's why fantasy football is fun. But I still think Sutton ends up being the wide receiver 1 in Denver this season, especially because Wilson has one of the best deep balls in the league. And Sutton can carve up deep balls. Defensive backs. No doubt about it, with a competent quarterback, with the right quarterback, with a good arm, and an accurate one at that. So I think we're going to see several multi-touchdown games from Sutton this season, and wouldn't be surprised if he kicks that off in week 1. The Seahawks were 25th in PFF's pass coverage grade last year and allowed the second most yards per game. Smash spot for Sutton. Love him in week 1. Next up, you got Deebo Samuel at Chicago. I know a lot of people are down on Samuel this year, and maybe some of that's justified. Okay, there's reasons to be skeptical or suspicious, but he's legitimately the most, or arguably the most versatile receiver in the game. He proved that last year. And Kyle Shanahan, they just paid this guy, $76 million? They're going to find ways to keep Samuel heavily involved, whether it's as a receiver or a rusher. He's also purely dominant after the catch. How good was he after the catch last year? I'll tell you. He was the best in the league by a wide margin. He averaged 10.2 yards after the catch per reception. Just bonkers. And PFF ranked the Bears secondary second to last heading into the 2022 season. And if you look at the roster, it makes a whole lot of sense. You will not question it. As a massive 7-point favorite on the road in week 1, I like Samuel a lot. Even if we can expect him to have some down weeks throughout the year, and we should, week 1 is an excellent way for him to open up the season. Some must-sit players. Again, you don't have to sit him if you don't have better options. But DK Metcalf's a guy that I'm not looking to get too much of this week at all. I mean, Geno Smith at quarterback, the offensive line is going to be very bad this year. Patrick Surtain in the secondary for Denver. It's an ugly spot. I mean, listen, he's a monster and he can produce against any defensive back. But if there were a lot of red flags in any matchup, it's certainly this one for DK Metcalf. Not to mention the Seahawks have a 19-point implied total heading into this game. Also, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't like this spot. A lot of red flags. There is a pass catcher for the Detroit Lions that I do like quite a bit this week, and we're going to get to him in just a minute. But St. Brown is not one of them. With Darius Slay, Bradbury looking to have a bounce-back season, but also the fact that they just traded for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, this secondary looks a lot better than it did a season ago. I think there's a way to exploit this Eagles defense, but it's not going to be with St. Brown this week. Must-start tight ends, Darren Waller at the Chargers. Waller's had a somewhat tumultuous summer with the Raiders, but he's going to be on the field, or he's expected to be on the field for week 1, and that's all that matters. The Chargers defense, too, is going to be good, and their secondary looks like it could be very good. They have J.C. Jackson on the outside, and they have a top slot corner in Bryce Callahan. But that's what makes Waller so appealing in week 1. The Chargers were ravaged by opposing tight ends last year. Fantasy points per game, most. Yards, most. Touchdowns, second most. Receptions, sixth. And with Javonte Adams and Hunter Renfrow drawing difficult matchups, obviously I'm not saying either of them can't produce, but Waller could explode here. And you really can't worry about the hamstring injury that sidelined him in camp for a while. He's back at camp. He's expected to be ready. That's all we can ask for. You have to plug him in week 1 against the LA Chargers. TJ Hawkinson against the Philadelphia Eagles. Hawkins is the one pass catcher that looks good for Detroit. I mentioned that with St. Brown. This is the guy I like. And remember when I mentioned that the Chargers allowed the second most touchdowns to opposing tight ends last year? Well, the Eagles allowed the most with 14. It's the weakest part of the defense by far, and it has been for a while. And last year, they were tied with the Chargers for the most fantasy points per game allowed to tight ends. They allowed the most touchdowns, as we discussed, and the most receptions. And with the Lions, they got their doors blown off by Philly in week 8. But Hawkinson caught 10 balls for 89 yards on 11 targets that week with a 33% target share on the day. If you drafted Hawkinson, you just have no choice but to play him in week 1, and it's a good spot. We'll throw some must-start quarterbacks at you because, some people need it. Jalen Hurts against the Lions. Listen, there's nothing we don't know here already. The Eagles should be able to run the ball easily in this one. They ran for 236 yards against the Lions last year, but Hurts led them in rushing yards with 71. And who knows if Miles Sanders will even be ready. They should also be able to throw with very little resistance. The Lions drafted Aiden Hutchinson, going to be good, and they should have an improved pass rush. But one, the Eagles have arguably the best offensive line in the league, and two, Hurts can just completely he can make life hell for opposing pass rushers with his legs. Now he has an added weapon in A.J. Brown alongside Javonte Smith and Dallas Goedert. What's not to ask for? You actually couldn't ask for a better matchup to kick off the season for Jalen Hurts. All systems go here, no questions asked. Also, Russell Wilson, you're starting Wilson for the same reasons I mentioned earlier with Courtland Sutton. Subpar secondary for Seattle, bottom-ranked pass rush, and Denver's a touchdown favorite in Wilson's old house. They should be able to get it done in both phases of the offense, and Wilson has plenty of weapons at his disposal. There aren't a ton of quarterbacks you'd rather have in week one, in my opinion, especially considering the Seahawks coughed up 266 passing yards per game in 2021, second worst in football. Matthew Stafford against Buffalo. Some of you may be shaking your head here. The matchup looks a whole lot less scary with Tre'Davious White sidelined for the Bills, though. With Dane Jackson being his replacement, Stafford should have a much easier time moving the ball downfield, especially when he'll have Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson. I do like Allen Robinson plenty this week at his disposal. Now, you have a game that's boasting the second highest total of any game in week one, 52 points, and the Rams have a very respectable 25-point implied total themselves. If you waited to draft a quarterback and landed Stafford as probably the 11th or 12th quarterback off the board, you got to start him in week one. Even if you have concerns about the elbow, there's just too many talented pass catchers in this offense. It's too good an offense, reigning Super Bowl champions, and the Bills are down their all-pro corner. Couple honorable mentions for those of you guys in maybe two quarterback leagues or deep leagues. Derek Carr, matchup looks tough on paper against the Chargers, but when you have Waller, when you have Devontae Adams, and when you have Hunter Renfrow, and you have a high total in this game, I think there are a lot of ways that this could pay off big for him. He's on your roster. You need a starter. Perfectly fine. Same with Jameis Winston. Atlanta's secondary, two corners, not looking too bad, but they have zero pass rush to speak of. Winston's going to have all day to throw the football. And now you've got Alvin Kamara in the backfield, great pass catcher, Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, and Jarvis Landry. There's a lot to like about this passing game for the Saints. Don't sleep on Winston if you need someone either. Appreciate you guys hanging out as always. Must starts for week one, must sits. I mean, we are finally here and we're going to crush it in week one. Hopefully all these pay off. Again, leave a comment down below, like, subscribe. We'll catch you back here for the next one. Peace.